Welcome to the Ultimate Music Teachers Productivity and Profitability Podcast. I'm your host, Glory St. Germain. Tune in to discover how you can unleash your teaching potential and turn your passion for music education into profit. Let's dive in. As we navigate the harmonious and sometimes challenging world of teaching music, we often find ourselves seeking new perspectives, innovative techniques, and inspiring stories to kind of rejuvenate our passion for teaching. So, how can we transform our music lessons into a symphony of learning and joy, especially for our youngest students? Well, stay tuned as we unveil the secrets to captivating the young, the budding singers with creativity and play in the vibrant world of vocal pedagogy for children. Welcome to the Ultimate Music Teachers Podcast. I'm your host, Glory St. Germain, and today we have a very special guest who is a true innovator in the field of music education. And I am thrilled to introduce my friend and colleague, Nikki Loney, a visionary vocal pedagogy, particularly for young singers. She is the founder and CEO of The Full Voice Music. Nikki collaborates with music education specialists and children's composers to craft exceptional resources for young vocal students. She's an active member of the National Association of Teachers of Singing and hosts the globally recognized and very successful Full Voice podcast. Nikki is also an Ultimate Music Theory certified teacher and a workshop presenter. Nikki's approach challenges traditional norms, focusing on play-based learning and keeping lessons engaging and fun. So let's dive into a conversation that promises to be enlightening and full of a few surprises, I'm sure. Welcome, my traveling buddy, Nikki. Hey, Nikki.
Thanks, Glory. It's so nice to see you and to talk to you today.
Absolutely. And it's such an honor to have you on the podcast because we've traveled. We could probably write a book on our adventures.
I think we could.
To several locations, presenting workshops together, having a lot of fun, getting lost for a while and finding our way. And I'm looking forward to hanging out with you this year. We're going to have some fun, I'm sure, Nikki.
Oh, we always have fun, Glory.
Yeah.
I think we have matching clothes.
We do have matching outfits.
Right?
Yes, that's a fun one too. So Nikki, share with us what sparked your passion for vocal pedagogy and especially those young singers. How has it kind of shaped your journey in the world of music education?
Well, my evil agenda is always to encourage more teachers to work with young singers. And I do have to say, like many teachers, my first few years of teaching was very stressful because I just didn't have the skill set and I didn't have the community of teachers to talk to and to speak to and to run ideas by. And there was a absolute void in music education resources for young singers. So in my early years, I had no choice but to basically not teach young singers. And it was actually when I started doing workshops, probably maybe a little bit before you and I met, but I started doing piano. I went to see piano workshops and I was always fascinated with how they worked with children and how they made learning the piano really exploratory and really hands-on and with a lot of play. And I remember thinking, well, why can't we do that with our singing students? So I started to rethink my decision to not work with children. And I started to look into and do some learning about play-based learning and music education. And of course, I then, did my Kadai training and worked with such inspired teachers like yourself. And I mean, I have to say, Glory, traveling with you and seeing you present your information and making music theory play based. That was so inspiring as well. So I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by inspired teachers who recognized where a child was developmentally and where they were in their journey, and to be able to see that student and recognize that it's about them and not me. And I think that takes a lot of courage, to make your teaching about your students, and recognizing that your experiences are important in shaping you. But I don't know, I think I find my students are my best teachers. They teach us so much.
One of the things you said, Nikki, that resonated with me so much, and that is you talked about community, and
Mm,
meeting teachers. And I think sometimes we're solopreneurs. And
yes.
when we say, I mean, years ago, BC, before computers, we were pretty much a lone island. And now we have such an opportunity to network and connect with other teachers and groups and, Facebook groups and online events. And we can still travel if we choose to, but it's really opened up a world of education. And it really is
Mhm.
important for us to step into that, especially if we want to elevate our skill sets as educators. And in your view, Nikki, what's maybe one of the biggest challenge and opportunity in incorporating hybrid teaching methods like online and in person in music education?
I love that question. And I always see opportunities. I don't look at challenges. I mean, it's only a problem if you make it a problem. I
Yeah.
always feel that way. And I think I can talk about it now because we're enough out of the pandemic. But I think the pandemic shook a lot of us out of some really dated practices.
Hmm.
And I think the pandemic forced a lot of us to do the learning that we should have been doing to get really up to date. And I hope I don't get angry emails for saying this, but
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, I'm not saying that it wasn't a challenging time. I'm not saying that it wasn't a scary time, and I certainly know when I had transitioned to online teaching, there were days where I was exhausted, but it was also exhilarating. It was also really interesting to see a different platform and to see
Mhm.
how your instruction, was being perceived on that platform. And I think that teaching online made me a much more present teacher. I had to think on my feet, and I had to problem solve on my feet, and I had to learn a whole bunch of new things. I think that's good. I think
Yep.
that's good. So I think it gives us an advantage. Like if you're a private teacher and you're offering hybrid, well,
Hmm.
especially here in Canada, I
Yep.
mean, we just had another storm and a snow day, and teaching online would be the perfect thing to do tonight. And I wouldn't
Yep.
have to ask any of my families to go anywhere or drive
Yep.
in any dangerous conditions. So I think it gives us this an advantage over more like brick and mortar type of services. So
Yes.
and all of my families have really appreciated the flexibility.
Yep.
And now my studio, I transitioned to 100% online because I also moved to another province. So,
Yes.
but I mean, my families are there. I still have families with me. I still have students that actually prefer the online experience.
Yes.
It's far more convenient for their busy
Hmm.
schedules, and it works. It works
Yep.
for them. So I think there's just so many opportunities available
Yeah.
to us now. And if you're stuck with challenges, I would challenge a teacher to be like, maybe set those challenges aside and just look around at all the opportunities that you have. And
Yes.
that's my advice.
Yeah, I love that. It's not overwhelm, it's opportunity. And I think one of the things that you just said too, Nikki, about, stepping outside your comfort zone and learning something new. And I think one of the big perks for me, and of course, Monday I was teaching in person, Tuesday I was teaching online, and that was the end. It wasn't an option for us here. But what happened was we got a sneak peek inside our students' homes
Oh,
where they're
so true.
practicing, where they're singing.
Hmm.
Why is the TV on when you're trying to practice your vocal lines or do what you
Hmm.
need to do for your music? why are you practicing in the basement? Why are you like all these things? And what happened too is that I think took on another level as an educator, because I could say, okay, well, when you're practicing, could you get your mom in here for a second, right? So
Yeah.
maybe turn the TV off when you're trying to practice. But I think what happened too is that when we came back to in person, all of my students said, we love online. Like, can we just stay online?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I said yes, because it works for me as well. So when you're kind of doing a little think back, can you share a moment or a humorous story from your career that taught you an invaluable lesson about teaching or music education? Give us some funny stuff.
Mm. One of my students I was teaching when we had gone online, and like you were saying, you get a picture window into people's homes. And I agree with you, like seeing how my students weren't really set up in a way that was for productive for practicing. So you were able to coach them. So I had a student who we had been trying to get a space in his room where he could stand and sing. So I think we had moved him over and we had put his iPad on his dresser, and it was great. He had more space and the light was coming in from the window and I could see all his expressions. And he's singing this song. And then his dad walks by in a towel because he has just come out of just had a shower. And thank goodness he had a towel on. And he was not aware that we were in the middle of a lesson and we were singing. And he's like, hey, what? And he's talking. And my poor student is, he's like a young teenager and he is absolutely mortified. And I'm laughing. And I like the dad was like, oh no. And so, anyhow, I'm just very thankful he had a towel on. But needless to say, the door was then shut for the
Yeah.
following lesson. So, yes, I did have a dad walk by in a towel when we were teaching online, and that
Oh, the
was quite something.
bonus entertainment for
Right?
when you're teaching. I mean, we just, we're sharing some stories. So quick story for you, Nikki. I was teaching a student and I had her book and she had her book and she was playing her music. I couldn't see the music. I mean, I could see her music on the piano. And so I said, can you play, these measures? And so she played and she's playing all the wrong notes and everything. And I said, I'm sorry, could you just start again and just start, in the second measure? And she said, okay. And she played. I said, in the second measure. She said, I am in the second measure. And I said, well, let me see your book. And so she showed me her book. She was in the second measure, but she was in like 3 pages over in another piece. So I was like, oh, now, I get it. Wrong page. But yeah,
Yep.
you have a lot of fun and that's what it's all about. And speaking of fun, you really advocate for play-based learning and singing lessons. So how do you think this approach really transforms the learning experience for young students?
I think it is the teacher's responsibility to transform the experience for the students. This is something that I'm so very passionate about. And one of the regular workshops that I host through Full Voice Music is the play-based learning, engagement, and lesson pacing workshop. And it's a real eye-opener for a lot of teachers because there's some nasty teacher traps that we all fall into. And I
Mhm.
raise my hand. I have fallen into these traps. It's really challenging. The first thing when it comes to play-based learning is that, and this is where we have to really acknowledge our egos and our insecurities, because obviously we've put our life, blood, sweat, and tears into our art, into becoming the teachers that we are. And we do want people to take us seriously. So a lot of times when people think of play-based learning or making things fun, it feels not as productive for, say, a result driven studio. Like we want, we're just goofing around, or we're just,
Yeah.
the kids then, that play-based learning isn't free play. So the kids, you still have goals, you still have objectives, you're just lighting up the brain, and that's how we all learn. That's how we all learn. When children play, when we all play, there's fun fact, there is no cutoff age for the effectiveness of play-based learning. So if you're working with teenagers or even young adults, they need some fun too.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee that your super moody teenagers need some fun as well. They might fight you on it at first, but they'll get more out of your lesson. So when we present information in a way that's playful, what we're doing is we're allowing students to use what they already know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that makes introducing new concepts much easier
Yeah.
because they're in a safer place. They're doing
Mm-hmm.
something that they feel safe, they feel confident in play. So, we take away a lot of the scariness, we take away a lot of the anxiety, we take away a lot of the fear when we bring that sense of play
Mm-hmm.
into our studios. And it doesn't really take that much. It doesn't mean that you're being silly or goofy. It just means the example that I use with teachers all the time is just the simple act of I have a little jar and there's tongue twisters written on pieces of paper. And just the act of the hands on, active reaching into a jar and pulling out a tongue twister brings this level of excitement and curiosity. And oh my goodness, I wonder what I'm going to get. And
Yeah.
even online, I reach into the jar, but I tell my student, okay, tell me when to stop. And
Right.
then I'll say something like, it's probably going to be the hardest tongue twister you've ever done. And like they giggle and laugh.
Yeah.
And I've shared that with, I don't know, hundreds of teachers. And I always get these emails, Glory. I had a choral director from out in BC. And she sent me this email. She says, I have to thank you. I had no idea the concept of reaching into a jar and pulling out an exercise was going to be so life changing. But she was saying that she has a middle school choir and, had a really hard time getting them interested, getting them paying attention. She said the jar of doom with the tongue twisters was a game changer. All the kids were excited, everybody was paying attention, and they went on to have a wonderful rehearsal. And she's like, I would have never believed it. I would have never believed it if you told me that. So when we think about play and engaging students, it's really about meeting them where they are. And the other thing that we do with play is we personalize the learning. So we learn a little bit about our students. So I always use this example. So I have a little student. We've been singing for a while. I can tell she's starting to get a little distracted. Maybe she's a little bored, but I happen to know that she loves cats and she like lives for her cats because she's always talking about cats and she's got a big cat on her t-shirt. So we meow her scale. Right. And as silly as that sounds, meowing a scale is actually really challenging and a fabulous vocal warm up. But now I have that engagement because this
Mm-hmm.
is something that's fun and she has an image of her cat. She's being playful. There's just so many wonderful ways that we connect with people. The one thing that I always like to remind teachers, and this is one of those teacher traps when it comes to engagement, engagement is not compliance. A lot of teachers, when they ask about engagement, they're asking, how do I get the child or my student to do what I want them to do and learn as fast as possible? That's not engagement. That is somebody that's just doing what they're told. Now, while that might seem pleasant in your studio or online or wherever you're teaching, the chances of them actually taking the information home and wanting to do anything with it is pretty much zero.
Mm-hmm.
Engagement is the genuine interest and passion and excitement for learning. And that only comes when we meet the student where they are at.
Yeah.
And it is life changing for a teacher. If you are struggling and you feel absolutely exhausted at the end of your day because you've been just you've been fighting with students or just trying to get them to do what you want them to do, it might be time for like a change of approach and try some more fun stuff. And
Yeah.
I know that piano teachers, they do lots of off the bench activities. Same thing. Same thing. We give
Yeah.
students an opportunity to move around, to be
Mm-hmm.
actively involved, and it makes a world of difference.
Yeah. It just, I mean, and you're such a fun teacher. I mean, obviously, I've seen you presenting many times, and just the joy and laughter and things that you bring into your teacher presentations. And I've seen you too sharing some videos of you with your students, and it makes such a difference when you see their smiling faces. And I
Mm.
remember one video of your students said, can I share my piece with them? Like, and they were like so excited to
Oh,
share, right?
yes.
And
Yes.
it was such a cute video, and I just loved it. It was just like, she was just like, oh yeah, go ahead and tell everyone, like she was just super proud, and just the confidence that they come up with. And
Mhm, mhm.
when you're looking at speaking, to educators, what's maybe one piece of advice you could give to music teachers who are just starting to teach young vocal students?
I'm stealing this from a good friend and colleague, Dr. Jennifer Williams, who I've had the pleasure of presenting with and getting to know really well this past year. Make easy easier and really simplify. And I guess the best advice I would have that goes along with that, if you are teaching, say, online, like
Yeah.
record the lesson and watch yourself and then watch your student. I have in our teacher training course and in our online course, I have a lot of little videos of me working with my students. And while there's beautiful moments in all of those videos, there's also moments where I recognize things like, I really was going too quickly there, or I didn't give my student enough processing time, or I wasn't really letting them lead and show me how fast they wanted to do that. If you watch your teaching, and then you will pick up so many different ways that you can improve your flow, the language that you use, the pacing. I always joke around lesson pacing, not lesson racing.
Yeah.
But there's one of those teacher traps, right? Like, we often feel really productive if we get through a whole bunch of information. Our learners, even our adults, can only take in so much information, usually at the beginning of the lesson. And then the rest of the lesson should be exploring that one little thing that you were talking about.
Mhm.
So, again, that would be my advice. If you're just getting started out, and it's easy if you are teaching on Zoom because you can just hit
Yeah.
record and record the lesson. Sit, grab a cup of coffee or tea, get a pencil in your journal, and just watch how quickly you are talking to them, watch the
Mhm.
reaction of your students, watch how much you're maybe overcompensating for your students. That would be the other little tip I would have for voice teachers. Step away from the piano. Let them sing unaccompanied.
Mhm.
Do as much voice to voice work. And if you are one of those talented accompanist persons, just wait. Don't be so eager to fill in all the space with the accompaniment, because we don't often give our students enough time just to hear the vocal line. So there are my two tips: record yourself and step away from the piano.
I love both of those. I really do, because in this day and age, like you said, it's so easy to hit record, even if you're teaching in your studio. I mean, you've got your Zoom camera or whatever camera,
Mhm.
you can record it. And it is really important to watch yourself. And I know you and I have recorded a lot of our presentations, and I've watched a million times of my own, learning different things that I do as a presenter, as
Oh, so
as an
much. Yeah.
educator, as a performer in working on my music as well. And I know you've seen so much of that out there, and
Mhm.
watching your students and watching yourself. Those are really great tips. And I
I
also love
wanted
that.
to Oh, I'm
I
sorry to interrupt. I wanted to tell the listeners that that's one of the things that you and I did when we were first traveling together. You
Yes.
and I would record each other's
Yep.
presentations. And I
Mhm.
have to thank you, because at first I really didn't want to do that. I was like, nah, it's fine. But honestly, Glory, I remember we would watch, I would,
Yep.
we'd get back to the hotel and I'd
Yep.
watch the presentation, and I thought my presentation was pretty good, but I'm watching the replay and it's like, I do that with my hands,
Yes.
right? I talk that fast. And I have to thank you because like it was having you watching your presentations and recording them. Like I think that I probably, learned a lifetime about presenting,
Mhm.
in that experience that we had traveling together, and
Yeah.
also just recording those presentations. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nikki, because it was fun and it was educational. And I think even taking that step in to teachers when they're doing their lessons. And
Mhm.
well, the other thing I love that you said is step away from the piano, because many times when we think about vocalists and
Mhm.
singers, they might be recording an album. They might be recording them, because I know you've done all kinds of recordings, voiceovers, and you've got, YouTube videos and so on. And the voice has to be the voice. And
Mhm.
it's not, as you said, don't be so busy filling things in. I love that, because what if you decide you want to sing a cappella in an a cappella group? It's your voice that has to carry you through. It's not all the
Yeah.
little noodling, that goes on in
Yeah.
between. So it's interesting. So
Yeah.
speaking of podcasts, you've got your
Mm.
podcast, which I've
Mhm.
been such an honor to be a guest on your podcast too, Nikki. So thank you. You've interacted with various music educators and
Mhm.
experts. What's one surprising insight that you've gained from all of the podcast interviews that you've done?
Oh, that's a great question. My biggest takeaway from doing a podcast is, I mean, just how much I take back from each and every guest and I bring it back into my own studio and into my own experiences. Oh gosh, there's just so many incredible people out there just doing great work and really leveraging our industry. There's so many people like yourself out there teaching people how to run a business and
Mhm.
how to make, a living from doing what you love. And I'm truly grateful to all of the guests that I've had. And yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from all of my guests is just how far our industry has really come along.
Yeah.
And there's so much information out there, and it's not behind a paywall.
Mhm.
Until you want to do some really deep dives, it's not behind a paywall. Like you've got like podcasts, like your
Yep.
podcast, like my podcast, blogs. There's just so much great information out there. I'm just in awe of the incredible people and the creative forces that are out there. And
I think you've really nailed it when you also showcase your guests, and there's so much generosity with
mm,
with them providing that. And
yeah,
I certainly will add a link to your podcast
yeah.
here in the show notes as well, Nikki. And I'll have to go back and see if I can find the episode that I was on, listen to it again, because I know that was a
Mm,
long time ago. And a lot of
hmm
things have changed since then. So sometimes I think it's funny to go back and listen to these podcasts
hmm
that we were on and go,
hmm
oh, right, that's what I was doing back then.
Yeah, I remember your podcast. I remember you were talking about neuro-linguistic
Oh, yes,
programming
my
and
NLP.
and communication skills. And it
Yeah,
was like a really fabulous conversation,
yeah.
I guess I'm going to go back to that question. I think all the people that are thinking outside the box in our industry, right? Like where we get our inspiration from doesn't necessarily have to be from, necessarily music, right? So, and
Right.
how we take that outside inspiration and put it into our studios, into our teaching, into our careers. I think that's one of the big takeaways.
Yeah, yeah, for sure it is. So if you could have a duet
Mm.
with anyone, any musician, singer, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Mm. Oh, okay. So, without a doubt, I would love to just sing with my dad.
Ah,
I miss my dad a lot. So my dad passed away a few years ago before we moved out to Nova Scotia. It was very sudden, And I grew up singing with my dad. And my dad is the reason that the full voice workbooks exist. I was complaining one day that there wasn't any resources for kids. And he was like, well, why don't you do something about that? And I did. Yeah, I grew up singing with my dad, and my dad loved to sing. He'd sing in the car, he'd sing harmonies. If there was a musical on the TV, he'd sing at the top of his lungs. I would sing. I would love to sing with my dad. I know someday I'll be able to sing with my dad again, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a blessing to have had that growing up,
Yep.
to be able
Yep.
to share that passion and for him to support you in that way. What good advice is that? Well, if there's a problem, fix it, right?
Right.
It's like just run with it. And
Yeah.
he was a business owner in his own right, an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and you obviously got that gene as well, and created the full voice workbooks and the full voice music and podcast and education that you're running now for music teachers. It's incredible. And when you think about it, how do you balance all the technical aspects of singing, with joy and creativity and lessons for all of these students?
Okay, that's a really great question. And that's one of the challenges for a lot of singing teachers. So if you have been studying the art and the science of the human voice, how do you bring that to a child that's just learning? And forgive me, but I'm going to use a baseball analogy. So, for teachers out there that love to, talk about the respiratory system, or, talk about, the vocal folds in scientific ways, how do you break that down? Well, when it comes to children, or actually when it comes to most of your singers, including adults who are just beginning, you just have to let them sing. And you need to just that technical aspect of things. I mean, my son, if anybody's listened to my podcast, know that I talk about Noah. And as much as my musician husband and I would have liked him to take piano lessons, we have a little baseball boy. And I have learned so much from amazing baseball coaches who are like top, MLB trained, experienced humans. When they work with children, there is no lecture about muscles. There's no technical talk. It is allowing them to move their bodies and allowing them to experience the activity, and
Mhm.
then asking them to change something, and then asking them, hey, did that work for you or didn't it work for you? And it's really more of exploring and letting them use their bodies in a way until they find that ease.
Yes.
And that ease doesn't come with a lecture of the bicep muscle or, how many muscles are in the hands. It comes from, well, what if you did try this? What if you
Mhm.
did that? And I have to say that even at a young age, like when Noah was learning, I think he was 6 when he first went to batter zone in Hamilton. And his coach was all about mechanics, and it was all about learning to throw the ball properly so that you didn't get injured.
Mhm.
But it was done with games,
Yeah.
and it was done with challenges, and it was done with simple little exercises and drills that were allowed to be repeated over and over and over again with minimal instruction. And I've learned so much from watching those baseball coaches. And less talking, more singing.
Mhm.
Less talking, more singing. You know, how did that feel? I wonder, my favorite phrase that I use all the time, I wonder what would happen if. I wonder what would happen if you relaxed your jaw. I wonder what would happen if your jaw was made of jello and you tried singing that line with your jello jaw. And they have to experience it in their own bodies and on their own terms. The scientific musculatures, all that can wait.
Yeah.
Years, years, years down the road. I do that with adults too. I don't get into a lot of the technical stuff unless they're truly interested and unless I
Mhm.
think it might help. But I think that's just make easy easier, keep your instructions simple, and let them sing. Let them throw the ball, let them sing the song, ask them, I wonder what would happen if.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I do want to express, especially if there's any voice teachers listening, there is kind of a preface in our industry where we're trying to fix things. Like we're trying to give them exercises to fix this and to fix that or to do that. And I just want to remind teachers, like, our students aren't broken. They don't need to be fixed. And the sounds that they're making in that moment are the sounds that they actually need to make in order to get to the next step. So if we approach it with more of a meeting them where they're at, exploring those sounds, discovering other sounds that they can make, then you're going to have a much friendlier time. And then they're not going to feel so insecure or threatened or, I call it making peace with the voice. We don't need to, they're not broken. They don't need to be fixed.
Yeah. Wow. I'm going to steal all of that you just said, because that's how it's impacting me right now. I love all of that. Nikki, your insights and experiences are just incredibly valuable to our community of music educators. And I just want to say thank you for sharing your wisdom and, congratulations on your incredible work and how you serve music teachers, obviously around the world, and voice teachers and so on. How can people learn more about you and about the Full Voice music program?
Well, we have a fun and friendly website, fullvoicemusic.com. And I encourage teachers to check it out. There's a whole bunch of wonderful resources, free downloads. We have free warm-up songs, games. The Songbird warm-up game is just a delight. You can use it with all ages. That's probably the best place to find us. Of course, the Full Voice podcast is on all of the major podcast apps. And yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, I'm always happy to chat.
Oh, that would be fantastic. So check it out, fullvoicemusic.com. We'll leave the direct link in the show notes. And of course, Full Voice podcast as well. We'll make sure to put that in there too. Thank you so much, Nikki. As always, it's such a delight to chat with you. We could go on for days, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you, our listeners. That brings us to the end of another enriching episode of the Ultimate Music Teachers Productivity and Profitability podcast. And today we journeyed through the realms of vocal pedagogy for young singers, guided by the expertise and insights of our wonderful guest, Nikki Loney. So thank you so much for joining us. We've discovered new ways to infuse the joy and creativity into our music teaching. Nikki, of course, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and I look forward to our next traveling adventure together.
Me too. Thank you, Glory.
Yes, thank you. Remember, every note you teach, every smile you share, and every lesson you craft is a step towards shaping a brighter musical future. So as you continue on your teaching journey, let's take today's conversation and make it a reminder for the journey ahead and all of those beautiful minds that you are nurturing along the way with passion and innovation and a little bit of playfulness, as Nikki said. Thanks for tuning in and being part of our vibrant music teaching community. Until next time, keep the music playing. This is Glory St. Germain, and remember to subscribe to our Ultimate Music Teachers podcast, and of course, give it a review and share it with fellow music enthusiasts. Until next time, teach with passion. Thanks for listening to the Ultimate Music Teachers Productivity and Profitability podcast. Together, we can transform lives through the power of music education. I invite you to explore what's possible for your musical journey inside our UMT community. Simply join our Ultimate Music Teachers private Facebook group, where we network, answer questions, host live events, and connect on a deeper level. Here's to your ultimate music teaching success with productivity and profitability. Till next time, teach with passion.